In this company, I only take advice from people with crane blood running through their veins. Those words still echo in my mind, spoken with such casual cruelty by Thomas Crane, CEO of Lexium Ventures, in front of the entire executive board. I can still feel the weight of 2 years' worth of strategy documents in my hands, every projection meticulously calculated, every client relationship carefully nurtured, all dismissed in an instant because I wasn't family. I remember scanning the room, Brianna's smug smirk, Marcus's sympathetic but helpless gaze, the collective shock on everyone else's faces. That moment crystallized everything I'd been feeling for months, but had refused to acknowledge. I placed my laptop on the polished mahogany conference table with deliberate slowness. My hands should have been shaking, but they weren't. Instead, I felt an unusual calm as I plugged in my flash drive and opened a file. "Victor Langston, please take a seat," I said. The billionaire investor, whom everyone assumed wasn't coming, walked in. Then I spoke the words that froze the room. "This company's passwords have been changed. All accounts are now secured. And unless we restructure leadership legally, starting today, I'll be transferring every client in my portfolio to a new firm under my name, all backed by these contracts, which I personally negotiated, documented, and own." No one said a word. Thomas Crane looked like he'd seen a ghost. But let me back up. You need to understand how we got here. How I, Amelia Grant, went from being the most dedicated employee at Lexium Ventures to the woman who brought a dynasty to its knees. When I first joined Lexium Ventures 3 years ago, Chicago's skyline was still unfamiliar to me. I'd left behind a comfortable position in Boston for what I believed was my dream job: senior strategy officer at a cutting-edge private equity firm known for bold moves and impressive returns. The glass and steel building that housed Lexium's offices stood tall among the downtown high-rises, its reflective windows gleaming with promise under the Midwestern sun. My corner office overlooked the Chicago River, and on that first day, I remember thinking I'd finally made it. "Welcome to Lexium," Thomas Crane had said, his handshake firm as he showed me around. Tall, silver-haired, with the confident posture of a man who'd never questioned his place in the world, Thomas had built Lexium from the ground up. "We expect great things from you, Amelia." What he didn't say, what would become painfully clear within months, was that great things didn't include recognition, advancement, or respect. My first strategy meeting should have been a warning. I'd prepared a comprehensive analysis of potential investments in the emerging clean energy sector. The presentation was thorough, the projections conservative, but promising. I was halfway through when Brianna Steele, Thomas's niece and holder of the nebulous title Executive Operations Lead, interrupted. "This feels derivative of what Morgan Stanley pitched last quarter," she said, twirling a pen between manicured fingers. "Shouldn't we be more innovative?" The room went quiet. I'd never seen the Morgan Stanley pitch, and my research was original, based on months of market analysis. "I'd be happy to address any specific concerns," I offered, maintaining my professional tone. Thomas cleared his throat. "Let's move on to Marcus's presentation. Brianna raises a good point about innovation." And just like that, my work was dismissed. Marcus Bennett, head of client relations, shot me an apologetic glance as he took the floor. Later, he caught me in the hallway. "Don't take it personally," he said, his voice low. "Brianna does that to everyone who isn't family." "Is that how things work here?" I asked. Marcus shrugged. "The Cranes built this place. They have their own way of doing things." Over the next few months, I threw myself into my work, determined to prove my worth through results rather than bloodlines. I stayed late, came in early, worked weekends. I identified struggling tech companies with solid fundamentals but cash flow problems. Perfect acquisition targets for Lexium's East Coast Fund, which had been underperforming for years. My first major deal, acquiring a promising fintech startup called Nexus, saved the fund from collapse. The second and third deals that followed transformed it into Lexium's fastest-growing portfolio. The night we closed the third deal, I was alone in my office at 2 a.m., finalizing the paperwork. My phone rang. A panicked call from the Nexus CEO about last-minute concerns from their board. I talked him through it for hours, salvaging the deal that was teetering on the edge of collapse. When I finally left the office at sunrise, the cleaning staff were the only witnesses to my exhaustion and triumph. At the quarterly review the following week, I expected at least an acknowledgement of what I'd accomplished. Instead, I watched in stunned silence as Brianna presented her strategy for the East Coast Fund. Our innovative approach to identifying undervalued tech companies has resulted in a 32% increase in portfolio value, she said, using my exact words from the memo I'd written. I glanced at Thomas, expecting him to correct this blatant misattribution. He nodded approvingly at his niece. After the meeting, I approached him directly. I noticed Brianna presented my East Coast strategy, I said carefully. Thomas's expression hardened slightly. Brianna oversees all regional strategies, but I developed and executed that entire approach. Amelia, he interrupted. At Lexium, we're a team. Individual credit isn't how we operate. Yet Brianna had just received individual credit for my work. As I walked back to my office, Marcus fell into step beside me. That was rough, he said quietly. Is it always like this? I asked. Welcome to the family business, he replied, his tone resigned. Where family is the only business that matters. That night, I sat in my apartment overlooking the city lights, questioning my decision to join Lexium. I could have gone anywhere with my credentials and experience. Why stay where my contributions were invisible? The answer came in the form of an email from the Nexus CEO. Your guidance saved not just this deal, but our company. 50 families get to keep their jobs because of you. This wasn't just about my career anymore. Real people, real livelihoods depended on the work I was doing. I decided then that I would continue, not for recognition from the Cranes, but for the impact I could have. What I didn't realize was that my invisibility was about to become my greatest strength, because when you're invisible, no one sees you coming. 6 months into my tenure at Lexium, I had established a pattern. Close, impressive deals. Watch Brianna take credit. Repeat. Each cycle burned a little more, but I channeled that frustration into my work, building a network of clients who knew exactly who was behind their success. The East Coast Fund was now Lexium's crown jewel, and industry insiders had begun to notice the dramatic turnaround. Trade publications mentioned the mysterious strategy shift that had transformed the once struggling division. One morning, I arrived to find an invitation on my desk, a private dinner with Victor Langston, the billionaire investor whose backing could make or break firms like Lexium. The invitation was addressed directly to me, not to Thomas or Brianna. When I brought it to Thomas's attention, his reaction was immediate. I'll attend with Brianna, he said, plucking the invitation from my hand. You can prepare the talking points. Mr. Langston specifically requested to meet with me, I pointed out, about the East Coast strategy. Thomas's smile didn't reach his eyes. And I'm sure you've documented that strategy thoroughly in our systems. Brianna can handle it. That evening, I stayed late, ostensibly to prepare those talking points. But once the office emptied, I began exploring our digital infrastructure. As senior strategy officer, I had access to most systems, or so I thought. What I discovered shocked me. My administrative privileges had been quietly downgraded. Files I had created were now housed in directories under Brianna's name. Email drafts I had saved, detailed analyses, and client communications had been moved to her folders. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the monitor illuminating my face in the darkness. This wasn't just taking credit. This was systematic erasure of my contributions. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Thomas. We sat in his corner office, Chicago spread out below us like a vast circuit board. I've noticed some unusual changes to my system access, I began. Thomas leaned back in his leather chair. Nothing unusual, just standard security protocols. My work is being transferred to Brianna's directories. Your work belongs to Lexium, he said flatly. And Lexium belongs to my family. If you can't understand that, maybe you're not a good fit after all. The threat hung in the air between us. I maintained my composure, but inside, something fundamental had shifted. I understand perfectly, I replied, rising to leave. That night, I didn't go home. Instead, I meticulously documented everything. Every deal I had structured, every client conversation, every strategy I had developed. I created secure backups of all communications where I was clearly the originator. More importantly, I reviewed the client contracts I had negotiated. There, in black and white, was my salvation. I was listed as the primary point of contact on every agreement. The clients had signed with me as their representative, not with Brianna, not with Thomas, not with the abstract entity of Lexium. 2 days later, Victor Langston's office called. He still wanted to meet with me, without the Cranes. We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking Millennium Park. Langston was not what I expected, younger than his reputation suggested, with keen eyes that missed nothing. The East Coast strategy has your fingerprints all over it, he said after we ordered. Not the Crane approach at all. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. You're well informed. I make it my business to know who's really driving value. He studied me. Why do you let them take credit for your work? The question hit harder than I expected. I believed in the company's mission, in what we could build together. And now, I took a deep breath. Now I'm questioning whether there is a together at Lexium unless your last name is Crane. Langston nodded thoughtfully. I've been watching Lexium for potential acquisition, but I'm starting to think I might be interested in the architect rather than the building. By the time dessert arrived, we had outlined a possibility that had never occurred to me, my own firm, backed by Langston Capital. Think about it, he said as we parted. Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden in someone else's shadow. That night, I couldn't sleep. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Could I really walk? Away from Lexium? Start something new? The answer came the next morning in the form of an all-staff email. Congratulations to Brianna Steele on her promotion to Executive Vice President of Strategy, overseeing all regional funds. My job had effectively been given to her, while I still held it. When I passed Marcus in the hallway, his expression said everything. Did you see? He asked quietly. I saw. What are you going to do? I considered the question carefully. What I should have done months ago. Stop giving my power away. The weeks following Brianna's promotion were a study in controlled chaos. On the surface, I maintained the perfect image of a team player, attending meetings, responding to emails, even congratulating Brianna with a practiced smile. But beneath that facade, I was executing the most meticulously planned exit strategy of my career. Every night after the office emptied, I documented my work with forensic precision. Each strategy document, each client interaction, each successful deal, all cataloged with timestamps, email trails, and meeting notes. I wasn't just building evidence, I was creating an undeniable record of my contributions. The most revealing discovery came when I reviewed the client agreements more carefully. Not only was I listed as the primary contact, but the language specified that any material change in relationship management required client approval. Thomas and Brianna had never noticed this clause, one I had deliberately included in every contract I drafted. One evening, Marcus found me in the conference room surrounded by documents. Working late again? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. I nodded without looking up. Just tying up loose ends. He closed the door and lowered his voice. Something's different about you lately. You're calmer. I finally met his gaze. I've stopped fighting for recognition I'll never receive. That doesn't sound like the Amelia I know. Maybe you never really knew me, I replied, then softened. Or maybe I'm finally becoming who I need to be. Marcus studied me for a long moment. Whatever you're planning, be careful. The Cranes don't lose gracefully. I'm counting on that, I said. The following week, a major client, TELUS Tech, threatened to pull their business. The CEO was unhappy with recent communication breakdowns, all of which had occurred after Brianna took over. Thomas called an emergency meeting, his face flushed with barely contained anger. We cannot lose TELUS. They represent 15% of our East Coast portfolio. Brianna shifted uncomfortably. I've sent them the standard reassurance package. They don't want gift baskets, Thomas snapped. They want results. All eyes turned to me. I had built the relationship with TELUS from the ground up, saved them from bankruptcy, and personally restructured their debt. Amelia, Thomas said, his tone suddenly conciliatory, you'll need to step in, whatever it takes. I maintained a neutral expression. Of course, I'll handle it. That afternoon, I met with TELUS's CEO, James Morgan, at his downtown office. His frustration was evident as soon as I walked in. 3 weeks without a substantive response to our concerns, he said, forgoing any greeting. This isn't what we signed up for. I understand completely, I replied, taking a seat across from him. And I want to personally assure you that your concerns are being addressed. By whom? The emails from that Steele woman are nothing but corporate doublespeak. James, I said carefully, I need to be transparent with you. There are some structural changes happening at Lexium. His eyes narrowed. What kind of changes? The kind that might affect how your account is managed going forward. For the next hour, we had the most honest conversation I'd had in months. I didn't disparage Lexium directly, but I made it clear that the personalized attention he valued might not be guaranteed in the future. What are my options? He asked finally. For now, I'm still your point person. Nothing in your contract can change that without your approval. He leaned back, studying me. And if I want to ensure it stays that way? That, I said carefully, might require a different conversation in the near future. When I returned to Lexium, Thomas was waiting in my office. Well, he demanded. Tellus is staying. For now, I replied. But they've made it clear they expect me to remain their primary contact. His relief was palpable. Fine, fine. Do what you need to do. Just keep them happy. That interaction confirmed what I already suspected. Thomas would compromise his precious family-first policy when money was on the line. It was the final piece I needed. That night, I contacted Victor Langston. I've made my decision, I told him, but I'll need your support for what comes next. You have it, he replied without hesitation. What's your timeline? 2 weeks, I said. There's an executive board meeting on the 15th. Everything happens then. The days that followed were a flurry of discrete activity. I registered Grant Strategies LLC, secured office space in a building 3 blocks from Lexium, and prepared the legal groundwork for client transitions, all while maintaining the appearance of business as usual at Lexium. With each passing day, I felt a curious mixture of dread and exhilaration. I wasn't just leaving a toxic workplace. I was reclaiming my professional identity. 4 days before the board meeting, Thomas announced that it would include a special presentation on the future of Lexium's East Coast strategy, to be delivered by Brianna. He didn't even bother to inform me directly. I learned about it in the all-staff email. Marcus caught me in the elevator that evening. You're not even going to fight this? He asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Some battles aren't worth fighting, I replied. This isn't like you, Amelia. You've always stood your ground. I looked at him directly. Maybe standing your ground isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it's about knowing when to build something new. He studied me for a long moment. You're up to something. I simply smiled as the elevator doors opened. See you at the board meeting, Marcus. The night before the meeting, I executed the final phase of my plan. Using the administrative access I still retained to certain systems, I changed the passwords to all client portals, financial models, and strategy documents related to the East Coast Fund. I didn't delete anything. That would be illegal. I simply secured the access points. Then I sent a brief encrypted message to Victor Langston. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., be ready. I slept surprisingly well that night, better than I had in months. Whatever happened the next day, I would no longer be invisible. The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and bright, Chicago's skyline crisp against a cloudless October sky. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal gray suit, understated jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional, polished, powerful. The Lexium boardroom occupied the entire top floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling, windows offering a panoramic view of the city. By 9:45 a.m., the room was filling with board members, executives, and key stakeholders. Thomas stood at the head of the table, exuding confidence as he greeted each arrival with practiced charm. Brianna hovered nearby, clutching a tablet that undoubtedly contained my work, strategies, and projections she was about to present as her own. She barely acknowledged me when I entered, offering only a cursory nod before returning to her conversation with an elderly board member. Marcus arrived last, sliding into the seat beside me. You look different today, he whispered. Do I? Like someone about to burn a bridge. I smiled slightly. Or build one. At precisely 10 a.m., Thomas called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Today is about the future of Lexium Ventures, specifically our tremendously successful East Coast division. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. The East Coast Fund's turnaround was the company's biggest success story of the year. Before we begin, Thomas continued, I want to acknowledge the leadership that has made this possible. My niece, Brianna Steele, has revolutionized our approach to technology investments. I felt Marcus stiffen beside me. Brianna will now present our strategy for expanding this success in the coming year, Thomas concluded, gesturing for her to take his place at the head of the table. She rose confidently, smoothing her designer dress as she approached the display screen. Thank you, Uncle Thomas. I'm excited to share the vision I've developed for— Excuse me, I interjected, my voice calm but clear. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Before we proceed, I believe there's an important matter of attribution that needs to be addressed. Thomas's expression darkened. Amelia, this isn't the time. On the contrary, I said, rising from my seat. This is exactly the time. Before decisions are made about Lexium's future based on strategies I developed, deals I closed, and relationships I built. Brianna's face flushed. This is inappropriate. What's inappropriate, I continued steadily, is presenting someone else's work as your own. What's inappropriate is systematically erasing contributions because they don't come from the right bloodline. The tension in the room was palpable. Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Thomas's voice cut through the silence. In this company, I only take advice from people with Crane blood running through their veins, he stated coldly, staring me down. Perhaps you've forgotten that, Amelia. I haven't forgotten, I replied. I've simply stopped accepting it. I opened my laptop and connected it to the display system. What you're about to see is documented evidence of who actually developed and executed the East Coast strategy. Every model, every client relationship, every successful acquisition. The screen filled with emails, meeting notes, and contract signatures, all bearing my name, all time-stamped well before Brianna's involvement. This isn't just about credit, I continued. It's about integrity, about recognizing that merit matters more than bloodlines. Thomas's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is insubordination. You're fired, effective immediately. I nodded calmly. I expected as much. But before I go, there's someone who would like to address the board. On cue, the boardroom door opened, and Victor Langston walked in. His presence sent a shockwave through the room. As one of the most powerful investors in Chicago, his interest in Lexium had been rumored, but never confirmed. Mr. Langston, Thomas stammered, his anger giving way to confusion. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, Victor replied dryly, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Please, don't let my arrival interrupt Ms. Grant's presentation. Thomas looked between Victor and me, clearly trying to process this unexpected development. There's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I cut in, is the belief that you can take credit for other people's work without consequences. I turned to address the board directly. As of this morning, I've secured all systems related to the East Coast Fund. Not deleted, not damaged, simply secured. Additionally, I've formed my own firm, Grant Strategies, backed by Langston Capital. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Victor nodded in confirmation. Under the terms of the client agreements I personally negotiated, every major client in the East Coast portfolio has the right to follow their designated representative, me, if they choose to. Given recent events, I believe many will exercise that option. Thomas slammed his fist on the table. This is corporate sabotage. You sued for everything you're worth. It's not sabotage, I replied calmly. It's consequence. Every document is in order. Every client contract contains the clauses I referenced. You can review them with your legal team, once I provide access again. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What do you want? Thomas finally asked, his voice strained. Originally? Recognition, respect. A seat at the table I earned. I closed my laptop. Now? I want what I've built. The East Coast Division, structured as an independent entity under my leadership. Marcus was staring at me with undisguised admiration. Several board members were whispering urgently to each other. Victor Langston cleared his throat. If I may add something? My interest in Lexium was primarily due to the innovative approach of the East Coast Division. If that innovation walks out the door with Ms. Grant, so does my potential investment. The board members' whispers grew more intense. Thomas looked trapped. This is blackmail. This is business, Victor corrected. Something you claim to understand. The oldest board member, Harold Winters, spoke up. Thomas, I think we need to discuss this privately. Thomas hesitated, then nodded stiffly. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. As the board filed out, Brianna approached me, her expression a mixture of anger and grudging respect. You won't get away with this. I met her gaze steadily. I already have. The difference between us, Brianna, is that I earned everything I'm taking. She had no response to that. The 30 minutes stretched into 2 hours. I waited in a small conference room down the hall from the boardroom, Victor Langston keeping me company while Marcus brought occasional updates on the heated discussions taking place. They're divided, Marcus reported during one such visit. The younger board members see the value in what you've built and are advocating for a compromise. The old guard is standing with Thomas Ond. Principal. Principal? I echoed with a wry smile. Is that what we're calling nepotism now? Marcus shrugged. Family loyalty runs deep with them. But the numbers are hard to ignore. The East Coast Fund represents 30% of Lexium's current revenue. After he left, Victor studied me thoughtfully. Having second thoughts? I gazed out at the Chicago skyline, the afternoon sun glinting off, glass and steel. Not about what I'm doing, but I built something here. Part of me wishes it could have been different. If Thomas had recognized your worth from the beginning, we wouldn't be here, Victor pointed out. Remember that. At 2:30 p.m., we were summoned back to the boardroom. The atmosphere had changed, the tension now laced with resignation rather than shock. Thomas sat stone-faced at the head of the table, Brianna notably absent. Harold Winters, the senior board member, addressed me directly. Ms. Grant, the board has reviewed your proposal. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. While we find your methods questionable, we cannot deny the substance of your claims, or the financial implications. I remained silent, waiting. We are prepared to discuss terms for a restructuring of the East Coast Division. Thomas's jaw tightened visibly, but he said nothing. For the next hour, we negotiated. The outcome was better than I had dared hope. The East Coast Fund would become Grant Lexium Partners, a separate entity under my leadership, with Lexium maintaining a minority stake. I would take my team and clients, while providing a transition period to ensure continuity. Victor Langston committed to a substantial investment in the new venture, instantly giving it credibility in the market. As the details were finalized, Thomas finally spoke, his voice cold. I hope you realize what you're throwing away, Amelia. The Lexium name carries weight. Going up against us won't be easy. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not going up against anyone, Thomas. I'm simply claiming what I built. With our resources, he countered. With my brain, I replied. And my determination. The very qualities you hired me for. Then dismissed because my last name wasn't Crane. Harold intervened before Thomas could respond. Let's keep this professional. We have an agreement in principle. The lawyers can handle the details. As the meeting concluded, board members filed out, some nodding to me with newfound respect, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Thomas left without another word, his rigid posture betraying his fury. Marcus lingered behind. Congratulations, he said, his expression a mixture of admiration and uncertainty. You actually did it. Thank you for your support, I replied. It meant more than you know. He hesitated. So, what happens now? Now? I smiled. Now I build something better. Something based on merit, not bloodlines. I paused. I could use a head of client relations. His eyes widened. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Equal voice, equal stake. The surprise on his face gave way to a slow smile. When do we start? The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Legal documents were drafted and signed. Clients were informed of the transition. Most chose to follow me, as expected. Office space was prepared, systems established, a core team assembled. Through it all, I maintained a professional demeanor at Lexium, honoring my commitment to a smooth transition. I turned over all password access as promised and documented processes for whoever would take over my remaining responsibilities. Brianna avoided me entirely. From what Marcus gathered through the office grapevine, she had been reassigned to a less visible role managing family investments, a position created to save face rather than utilize talent. On my final day at Lexium, I cleared out my office methodically, packing 3 years of professional life into 2 cardboard boxes. As I placed the last items inside, a framed Harvard Business School diploma and a crystal award from my previous firm, Thomas appeared in my doorway. I underestimated you, he said without preamble. I continued packing. Yes, you did. Was it always your plan? To take what you learned here and start your own firm? I straightened up and faced him directly. No, my plan was to help build Lexium into something extraordinary, to earn my place through merit and hard work. And when that didn't happen, I adapted. Something they teach us non-cranes to do from an early age. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed his face. You'll find it's not easy, building something that lasts. I'm counting on it being hard, I replied. The difference is, I won't be fighting against my own team while I do it. He nodded. Slowly. Good luck, Amelia. You're going to need it. As I watched him walk away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a quiet certainty that I was finally on the right path. Marcus was waiting for me in the lobby, ready to walk the 3 blocks to our new offices. Ready? He asked. I took one last look around the Lexium reception area with its imposing logo and sleek, cold aesthetic. More than ready. Outside, Chicago bustled with mid-afternoon energy, the wind whipping between buildings as we made our way down Michigan Avenue. The Grant Lexium Partners offices occupied the 15th floor of a renovated Art Deco building, smaller than Lexium's headquarters, but with character and warmth the other space had always lacked. As we rode the elevator up, Marcus asked, "Any regrets?" I considered the question carefully. Only that it had to come to this. That merit alone wasn't enough. In my experience, the people most obsessed with bloodlines are the ones most afraid of being judged on merit. The elevator doors opened to reveal our new space, open, bright, with windows overlooking the lake. A dozen staff members, some poached from Lexium, others newly hired, looked up, expectantly as we entered. "Welcome to day one," I said, setting down my boxes. "Let's build something worth having." 6 months passed in a blur of 18-hour days, client meetings, and the 1,000 details involved in launching a new firm. Grant Lexium Partners quickly established itself as a boutique powerhouse, specializing in tech-focused private equity with an emphasis on ethical investment practices, a deliberate contrast to Lexium's cutthroat reputation. Our office culture reflected that difference. We implemented transparent attribution systems where every team member's contributions were acknowledged and rewarded. We instituted profit sharing rather than concentrating wealth at the top. Most importantly, we created an environment where ideas were valued regardless of who proposed them. The Chicago Financial Press took notice. The Business Journal ran a profile headlined, "Merit Over Pedigree: How Grant Lexium Partners is Rewriting Investment Culture." The article detailed our rapid growth and innovative approach, contrasting it with traditional family-dominated firms that prioritize bloodlines over brilliance. I kept the framed article in my office not out of vanity, but as a reminder of what we were building and why. Victor Langston proved to be the ideal investor, providing capital and connections while respecting our autonomy. His backing opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed to a new firm. On a personal level, the transition had been both liberating and exhausting. I had traded the frustration of invisibility for the weight of leadership. Every decision, every hire, every strategic choice now rested ultimately with me. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the satisfaction of building something authentic. One crisp March morning, I arrived at the office early to prepare for a meeting with a potential major client. The sunrise painted Lake Michigan in shades of pink and gold, the kind of view I'd never taken time to appreciate at Lexium. Melody, our office manager, intercepted me as I stepped off the elevator. "You have a visitor," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "In the conference room. I don't have anything scheduled until 9. He insisted on waiting, said it was important." She hesitated. "It's Thomas Crane." I felt a momentary jolt of surprise, followed by curiosity. "Thank you." "Melody, I'll handle it." Thomas stood looking out the conference room windows, his back to the door as I entered. He had aged visibly in the month since our confrontation, his shoulders slightly stooped, his silver hair thinner. "Thomas," I said by way of greeting. "This is unexpected." He turned, his expression unreadable. "Amelia, thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you?" He gestured to the conference table. "May we sit?" We took seats across from each other, the polished wood between us like neutral territory. "Your firm has made quite an impression," he began. "The Nexus acquisition was particularly well executed." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "But I doubt you came here to compliment our deal-making." A faint smile crossed his face. Direct as ever. He straightened in his chair. "I've come with a proposition. Lexium would like to increase its stake in Grant Lexium Partners." Significantly, I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "The numbers speak for themselves. Your growth trajectory is impressive. Our minority stake has been our best-performing investment this year. And," he sighed, "and your approach has merit. The emphasis on ethical investment has attracted clients we've been unable to reach." I studied him carefully. "What would this increased stake entail in terms of control?" "Board representation, input on major strategic decisions." "And leadership?" His hesitation told me everything. "We would expect appropriate influence given our investment level." I leaned back in my chair. "You want to buy your way back into controlling what I've built." "I want to create a partnership that benefits both entities," he countered. "Your innovation, our resources, and reach." "And who would lead this expanded partnership?" His eyes met mine. "A shared leadership structure, you and Brianna as co-CEOs." I couldn't help it. I laughed. The absurdity of the proposal was almost breathtaking. "Thomas, surely you're not serious." His expression hardened. "Entirely serious. Brianna has shown considerable growth in recent months. She's earned the opportunity, like she earned her previous positions, by being born into the right family. Family loyalty is not a character flaw, Amelia. No, but nepotism is a business flaw, one that nearly destroyed the East Coast division before I rebuilt it. I shook my head. I didn't leave Lexium to recreate the same toxic dynamic in a new setting. Consider the financial implications, he pressed. Our offer would value your stake at nearly triple its current worth. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine it. The wealth, the expanded resources, the validation of having Thomas Crane effectively admit he'd been wrong. But at what cost? Everything we'd built here was founded on principles directly opposed to the Lexium approach. Some things aren't for sale, Thomas. Not even at triple their value. His jaw tightened. This is business, not personal. It's both, I replied. The culture we've created here is as valuable as our portfolio. I won't compromise it, not for any price. He studied me for a long moment. You've changed. I've become who I always was. I just stopped hiding it. Thomas rose slowly. You're making a mistake. Lexium can be a powerful ally, or a formidable competitor. I stood as well. Is that a threat? A reality. The financial world is smaller than you think. Then I welcome the competition, I said calmly. On a level playing field, may the best ideas win. As I walked him to the elevator, we passed the common area where our team was beginning to arrive for the day. Their energy and purpose were palpable, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere I'd left behind at Lexium. Thomas noticed it too. You've built something impressive here, he admitted quietly. Yes, I agreed. Something worth protecting. After he left, I found Marcus waiting in my office. Was that who I think it was? I nodded. Thomas wanted to increase Lexium's stake, with strings attached. Let me guess. Brianna-shaped strings? Co-CEO arrangement, I confirmed. Marcus whistled low. That's either desperate or delusional. Maybe both. I sank into my chair. They're struggling without the East Coast revenue. The latest industry reports show their growth has stalled, so they want to buy what they couldn't build. He shook his head. What did you tell him? That some things aren't for sale. Marcus smiled. That's why we all followed you, you know. Not just for the opportunity, but for the integrity. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Victor Langston. Heard Crane paid a visit, standing firm on our principles? I texted back. Always. Some bloodlines aren't worth the price of admission. His reply came seconds later. That's why I backed you. Not them. Looking out at my team through the glass walls of my office, I felt a surge of pride and purpose. We were building something that would last. Not because of whose daughter or niece I was, but because of the values we stood for and the work we delivered. In turning down Thomas's offer, I hadn't just protected what we'd built. I'd affirmed why we'd built it in the first place. 1 year, after Grant Lexium Partners opened its doors, we celebrated with a rooftop reception overlooking the Chicago skyline. String lights twinkled above as staff, clients, and investors mingled in the warm June evening. The atmosphere was jubilant, and with good reason. We had just been named Boutique Investment Firm of the Year by the Chicago Financial Association, an honor typically reserved for all established players. I stood at the edge of the gathering, taking it all in. Marcus charming a group of tech executives, Melody coordinating with the catering staff, our analysts and associates laughing together by the bar. This wasn't just a company. It was a community we had built together. Victor Langston appeared at my side, champagne in hand. Quite a different scene from the Lexium board. Meeting last year, he observed. In every possible way, I agreed, accepting the glass he offered. Have you seen the latest on Lexium? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. I nodded. The financial news had been circulating for weeks. Lexium Ventures was struggling. Without the East Coast division's performance to bolster their numbers, their returns had slipped below industry averages. For 3 consecutive quarters, investor confidence was wavering. Thomas has been making the rounds with major investors, Victor continued, seeking capital infusions to stabilize their position. Successfully? Not particularly. Their pitch lacks something essential. Innovation, I suggested. Credibility, Victor corrected. The market remembers who was really behind their previous success. Before I could respond, Marcus approached with a client in tow, James Morgan, CEO of TELUS Tech, one of our first and largest clients. Amelia, James has some news he wanted to share personally, Marcus said, his expression suggesting I was in for a pleasant surprise. James, always direct, didn't waste time. Lexium approached us last week, offered preferential terms if we'd move our eye. Business back to them? My stomach tightened despite myself. Telus represented nearly 20% of our portfolio. Losing them would be a significant blow. I see, I said carefully. That must have been an attractive offer. James laughed. On paper, perhaps. But business isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's relationships. Trust. He raised his glass. We declined. Emphatically. Relief washed over me. I'm grateful for your loyalty. It's not loyalty, he corrected. It's good business sense. Your team understands our vision in a way they never did. After he moved on to greet other guests, Victor gave me a knowing look. And that, Amelia, is the difference between building on bloodlines and building on merit. As the evening progressed, I made my way through the gathering, connecting with each guest. Near the bar, I encountered a familiar face I hadn't expected to see. Harold Winters, the senior Lexium board member who had helped negotiate our separation. Mr. Winters, I said, genuinely surprised. I wasn't aware you were on our guest list. The elderly gentleman smiled. Victor invited me. Hope that's not overstepping. Not at all. It's good to see you. He glanced around at the celebration. You've done well for yourself. Built something substantial. Thank you. That means a lot coming from someone with your experience. Harold hesitated, then lowered his voice. I'm not here just as a guest, Amelia. I'm here as a messenger of sorts. My guard instantly rose. From Thomas? From the Lexium board. He sighed. Things have deteriorated since you left. The numbers tell part of the story, but not all of it. I'm not sure I understand. Harold led me to a quieter corner of the rooftop. Thomas has become increasingly rigid, defensive. The culture has suffered. Several key team members have left. Morale is at an all-time low. I absorbed this information carefully. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not sure how it concerns me. The board is considering a change in leadership, he said bluntly. Thomas's position is no longer secure. The implications hit me like a physical force. Are you saying, we want you back, Amelia? Not as an employee, as CEO. For a moment, I couldn't form words. The irony was almost too perfect. Being offered the very position that had been denied me because of my lack of crane blood. What about Thomas? I finally asked. He would transition to chairman emeritus, advisory role only. And Brianna? Harold's expression tightened. That would be your decision to make as CEO. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, the lights of the financial district glittering against the darkening sky. Somewhere in that constellation of buildings stood Lexium headquarters, where I had once been invisible. I'm flattered by the offer, I said carefully. But I've built something here that I believe in. Something based on values that Lexium has consistently rejected. Values can change, Harold countered. Cultures can be transformed. With the right leadership, I studied him. Why me? There must be dozens of qualified executives who would jump at the chance. Because you understand Lexium's potential better than anyone. You saw what it could be, even when the rest of us were blinded by tradition. He paused. And because the most valuable clients specifically asked for you. I felt a complex wave of emotions. Vindication, certainly, but also a strange sense of melancholy for what might have been if Thomas had recognized my value from the beginning. I need time to consider this, I said finally. Harold nodded. Of course. The board meets next Friday. We'd appreciate your answer by then. After he left, I remained at the edge of the rooftop, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. The celebration continued behind me. The success we'd built together tangible in every laugh and conversation. Marcus found me there, 2 fresh glasses of champagne in hand. You look like someone who just got surprising news, he observed, offering me one. I took the glass. Harold Winters just offered me the CEO position at Lexium. Marcus nearly choked on his drink. You're kidding. Completely serious. He studied my face. And you're considering it? I'd be lying if I said it wasn't tempting. The validation alone would be hollow, Marcus finished. Amelia, you walked away from Lexium because it was built on the wrong foundation. Taking over as CEO wouldn't change that DNA. I sighed. You're right. Of course you're right. Besides, he added with a grin, we're just getting started here. The best is yet to come. Looking back at our team, their energy, their commitment, their belief in our shared vision, I knew he was right. We had built something authentic, something worth protecting and nurturing. Let's rejoin the party, I said, my decision made. We have a lot to celebrate. As we walked back toward the gathering, Marcus asked, "So what will you tell the Lexium board?" I smiled, that some legacies aren't worth inheriting, and that I'd rather build my own. The following week, I met Harold Winters at a quiet restaurant overlooking Millennium Park. He arrived punctually, his expression hopeful as he took the seat across from me. "I've given your offer serious consideration," I began after we'd ordered. "And?" His eagerness was palpable. "I'm honored by the board's confidence," I said carefully. "But I must decline." His face fell. "May I ask why?" "The compensation package would be substantial. The authority complete." I smiled gently. "It's not about money or power, Harold. It's about purpose. About building something that reflects my values from the ground up. You could transform Lexium's culture as CEO," he argued. "Implement the same principles you've established at Grant Lexium Partners." "Culture isn't changed by decree," I replied. "It's built day by day, decision by decision. Lexium's foundation would always be there, undermining any changes I tried to make." Harold sighed deeply. "The board will be disappointed, as am I." "I do have a counter-proposal," I offered. "One that might benefit both organizations." His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "A strategic alliance. Not a merger, not an acquisition. A true partnership. Grant Lexium Partners handling the tech and innovation sectors we excel in. Lexium focusing on their traditional strengths in established industries. With you remaining independent?" "Completely. Equal partners with clear boundaries and shared ethics." Harold considered this. "It's an interesting proposition. Less than we hoped for, but perhaps what we need." "Sometimes what we need isn't what we think we want," I observed. "Thomas won't like it," he warned. "Thomas will need to decide what matters more, his pride or the company's future." As we parted, Harold clasped my hand warmly. "You know, when Thomas first hired you, he told the board you had exceptional potential. It may be the one thing he got completely right." 2 days later, the Lexium board accepted my counterproposal. The alliance would begin with a 6-month trial period, with both firms maintaining their independence while collaborating on select projects. The news made headlines in the financial press. Former rivals forge innovative partnership, and Grant Lexium Alliance signals new approach to investment banking. The morning the announcement went public, I arrived at the office to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a handwritten note and a vintage fountain pen. The note read simply, "You built something better than I could have imagined. Use this to sign the deals that matter. Thomas Crane." The gesture was unexpected, a tacit admission and perhaps the closest thing to an apology I would ever receive from him. Later that day, as I prepared for the first official alliance meeting, Marcus stopped by my office. "Nervous about facing Thomas again in an official capacity?" I shook my head. "Not nervous, just reflective. About how different things might have been if he had valued merit from the beginning." Marcus leaned against the doorframe. "You know what I think? His loss was our gain. Without his short-sightedness, Grant Lexium Partners wouldn't exist." I smiled. "You have a point." The alliance meeting was held on neutral ground, a conference room at Victor Seo, Langston's downtown offices. Thomas arrived with Harold and 2 other Lexium executives. The tension was palpable but professional. As we reviewed the terms of our collaboration, I noticed something different about Thomas. The arrogance that had defined him was diminished, replaced by a quieter, more thoughtful demeanor. When the formal discussions concluded, Thomas asked if we could speak privately. In Victor's corner office overlooking the city we both called home, he finally addressed what had happened between us. "I made a mistake with you, Amelia," he said simply. "Several mistakes." "Yes, you did," I agreed, not unkindly. "The irony is, I hired you precisely because you weren't like the others. The yes men and family connections. I wanted your different perspective." He shook his head. "Then I did everything possible to silence it." "Why?" He considered the question. "Fear, perhaps. Fear that acknowledging your contributions might somehow diminish the Crane legacy." "A legacy is only as strong as what it builds," I pointed out. "Not what it protects." Thomas nodded slowly. "A lesson I learned too late." He gazed out at the Chicago skyline. "Brianna resigned, you know. Started her own small consulting practice. I heard. I wish her well." He looked surprised. "After everything?" "Holding grudges requires energy better spent elsewhere," I replied. "Besides, maybe she needed to build something of her own, too." As our conversation wound down, Thomas asked the question I sensed had been on his mind since our new alliance was proposed. Do you ever regret leaving Lexium? I thought carefully before answering. I regret that it became necessary. I regret that merit alone wasn't enough, but I don't regret what came after. Fair enough, he acknowledged. We returned to the conference room where our teams waited. The details of our alliance were finalized, documents signed, with Thomas's gift pen, and a new chapter began for both our firms. 6 months later, the trial alliance proved so successful that we extended it indefinitely. Grant Lexium Partners continued to thrive, our client base expanding beyond Chicago to New York, San Francisco, and even London. We maintained our culture of merit, transparency, and ethical investment through it all. Lexium, too, experienced a renaissance under new leadership. Harold Winters stepped in as interim CEO before passing the role to Marcus's former colleague at Lexium, who brought fresh energy and perspective. On the second anniversary of Grant Lexium Partners, we hosted a gala at the Art Institute of Chicago. The guest list included clients, team members, and key figures from Chicago's financial community, including Thomas Crane, who attended with quiet dignity. During a quiet moment in the evening, I found myself standing beside Thomas in front of Surat's A Sunday on La Grande Jatte, thousands of tiny dots forming a cohesive, beautiful whole. Remarkable, isn't it? Thomas observed. How something so unified can be made of such distinct, individual elements. A bit like a successful company, I suggested. He smiled slightly. Indeed, each contribution matters. Each perspective adds depth. He turned to face me. I never properly thanked you. For what? For the lesson. For showing me what I was missing by valuing bloodlines over brilliance. Later that evening, as I addressed the gathered guests, I looked out at the faces before me, my team, our clients, even our former adversaries, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. 2 years ago, I stood in a boardroom and made the hardest decision of my professional life, I began. Not the decision to leave, but the decision to build something new. Something based on the radical notion that merit matters more than pedigree, that innovation flourishes when every voice is heard, and that integrity is the only true foundation for lasting success. I raised my glass. To Grant Lexium Partners, to our alliance with Lexium Ventures, and to the principle that brought us here, that the value of your work is determined by its quality, not by your last name. As applause filled the grand hall, I caught Thomas's eye across the room. He nodded once, a gesture of respect between equals, the recognition I had sought from the beginning. In that moment, I understood that my journey had come full circle. I hadn't just built a successful company. I had changed a culture, not through vengeance or bitterness, but through the quiet power of excellence, integrity, and unwavering belief in my own worth. The company I had created wasn't just profitable, it was purposeful. The team I had assembled wasn't just talented, they were valued. And the legacy we were building together wasn't based on bloodlines, but on something far more enduring. The principle that merit matters, that every voice deserves to be heard, and that true leadership recognizes value wherever it exists. In the end, I didn't need a seat at Thomas Crane's table. I had built my own. And now, everyone wanted an invitation.